Hi guys, welcome to day 10 of quarantine, and today I'm going to talk to you about a few basic things about photography because I have been getting a lot of messages where people have been looking forward to uh, basics of photography. They've been asking me where can I find more knowledge about photography, why don't you make a video about talking about basics of photography. So I decided, why not? I mean, it is the quarantine, and whatever little knowledge I have, if that knowledge can help somebody, anybody, be it anybody, then that'll be really great. What I'll do today is talk to you guys about three basic things that make up an image, that make up an exposure rather. These three things are aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Also, I'll speak about how I combine these three to make images, and if possible I'll throw in some sample images as well, so that you guys can understand better how these three things come together to make an image. So yeah, let's get started. So the first thing which I look at when I am composing an image, technically speaking, is probably the ISO. Now, what is an ISO? ISO is nothing but the sensitivity of your camera sensor. The kind of light gathering capability that the sensor has. It depends also on the ISO, apart from shutter speed and the aperture as well. Now you might think that, okay, alright, I have an ISO range of say 100 to 12,800. I'll crank it up all the way till 12,800 and then gather as much light as possible. But there is a little bit of a catch. See, the more ISO value you increase, the more bigger the number of ISO. Of course, the light sensitivities of the sensor increases, but with that increases the noise as well, the image noise. Those fine grains that you see is something called image noise. That image noise increases exponentially as you increase the ISO. So say if I go from 200 ISO to 400 ISO to 800 ISO, of course the image will be brighter because of the light sensitivity of the sensor will be better. But then again, it'll get worse when it comes to image noise. So you need to understand your camera better, you need to understand your camera sensor better to guess that that this is the kind of ISO number that I can go towards a maximum limit. I have a 1D here, I have an RP there, I have the M50 here which I'm shooting with right now. With the 1D I can go up till about ISO, I don't know, 12,800, and that's absolutely fine. With the Canon EOS RP I can go till about ISO 3200 or 6400, which is the upper limit, whereas with the M50 I can go till about 1600 without introducing too much grain into an image. So since the M50 is a crop sensor camera, of course the ISO range, ISO capability of the camera will be a tad lower as compared to something like a really expensive 1D camera here. So you need to understand how ISO works, and to do that, of course, you need to understand your camera better. You need to understand the higher range of your ISO, how high can you go so that the noise levels remain controllable, and also the image becomes properly exposed. Of course, you can control noise in post-production as well in Photoshop, in Lightroom, but it is always better if you control that noise in the camera while you're taking the shot. So the second thing which I take care of when taking an image is the aperture. Now, what is an aperture? An aperture is nothing but the opening inside a lens. If you see the front element of a lens, you'll see an opening. It might be bigger, it might be smaller, it depends on the aperture number. Now, aperture decides the amount of light that comes into the camera sensor. So how is aperture decided? Well, aperture is decided by something called f number. You must have seen f numbers inside your camera menu or on the camera screen. That depends on what sort of f number that you choose, and also it decides the amount of light that comes into your camera. Now, f number is decided in something like a multiple of numbers like f2, f2.8, f4, f4.5, f5.6. There are multiple numbers which goes up till about f32, f36, depending on the lens that you have. Now, how does aperture work? Now, aperture works in a variety of ways. So if the f number of the aperture is low, suppose it's f2.8, which is the aperture of this lens right here, which is the 24 to 70 f2.8. f2.8 means the whole of the camera lens is wide, which means it lets in quite a bit of light. There are wider lenses as well, like the 50mm f1.4, 50mm f1.8, 85mm f1.4, and 1.2 even. So the more bigger the aperture is, the more light that the camera sensor will receive as a result, it'll create a beautifully blurred background and foreground, which you see in a lot of images. Also, a wide aperture lens, an aperture which is wide with a wide opening like f1.8, f1.4, f1.2 is immensely helpful when it comes to low light photography where the light is low. So you open up the aperture to its widest number, widest hole, or the lowest number that the camera lens allows you to, which means it lets you the maximum amount of light possible. Now, these wide aperture lenses are really expensive, although there are exceptions like the 50mm f1.8 for Canon, which is terribly cheap at about 6,000-7,000 rupees, and it lets you create some gorgeous images as a result of its aperture, which is f1.8. Also, there is something called depth of field, which is also decided by the aperture. What is exactly a depth of field? Depth of field is nothing but the area in front of an image and in the back of an image that is out of focus is called depth of field. So if you select a smaller f number like f1.8, f1.4 or even f1.2 and shoot your subject in that aperture, the subject will be beautifully in focus while the foreground and background will be completely out of focus. On the opposite side of things, if you select something like f11, f14, f16, f18, the entire range of image will be in focus because the aperture is closing down, it lets in less amount of light. The third thing which I take care of while composing an image, while shooting an image, is the shutter speed. Now, what exactly is shutter speed? A shutter speed is very simple to understand. It is the amount of time that the shutter remains open for light to come in. So there is a window which opens and closes, and it allows the light to come in for a particular amount of time, and it's decided in seconds. So it might be 1 by 10 seconds, 1 by 20 seconds, 1 by 100 seconds, 1 by 500 seconds, all the way up till 1 by 8,000 seconds, which a lot of camera allows these days. Or if you go down, you can go down till 1 second, 5 seconds, 15 seconds, and even 30 seconds. And beyond that, there is something called bulb mode, which lets you choose the amount of time that you personally would want the shutter to remain open. Now, bulb mode or 30 seconds or even lesser than that is generally helpful when you are doing astrophotography, when you want to create pictures of really dark environment. Now, the combination of these three, ISO, aperture and shutter speed, is what makes for an exposure, for what makes an image. You need to decide first of all what is it that you are shooting. I personally go to a scene and decide, depending on the light, the kind of ISO that I want. If it's bright, sunny, I select the lowest ISO possible because that gives me the least amount of noise possible, which is ISO 100 on all of my cameras. Now, if the light levels fall, if I think the light levels are low, I might increase the ISO, or I might play with the shutter speed and aperture as well. So it is a play of all these three things which decide how a final image looks like. It is also about the aperture as well, because if I'm shooting something like a portrait in an outdoor environment, I would want the entire background to be out of focus. In that case, I'll choose something like an f1.8, f1.4 or f2 or even f1.2 if I can so do. But it also depends on the kind of image that I'm creating, because if I want everything in focus, then I'll select something like f8, f11 depending on the kind of final output that I want. So starting today, I would create a lot of other tutorial videos about photography. So today I wanted to keep it very simple, and I wanted to talk about ISO, aperture and shutter speed. If you have any questions, leave down the comments below and I'll try and answer those questions. Then thank you so very much guys for watching this video. If you like this video, leave a thumbs up. If you want such content in the future, please consider subscribing. And yeah, thank you so very much. Stay home, stay safe, and I'll see you again very soon in my next video. Bye-bye.